All systems go. Clear for liftoff.
Yo, welcome on in, golf fans. It's your boy, GS Luke, with our Round 3 Showdown stream for the John Deere Classic. Hopefully, everyone's having a fantastic 4th of July, especially us fellow Americans as we celebrate our independence. But we've got a showdown slate to get into tomorrow. So yours truly had himself a day on the golf course today, was able to celebrate with some buddies. Am dealing with a little bit of heat exhaustion, though. So we are toughing it out, able to do this live stream here. But hopefully, everyone out there is able to celebrate with their friends and family and is ready to get after it for tomorrow's action. So feel free to go ahead and hit me up with any questions or any player pool deep dives you've got for me in the live chat. And I see we got a fellow sweaty tryhard already down there, Joshua Hurt in the chat. First off, welcome on in. Happy 4th to you. And you hit the nail on the head there, right? If you're watching one of these live streams on the 4th of July, especially if you're an American, that's as sweaty as a tryhard as you can get. So let's get this thing rocking. And this will probably be a quicker live stream because of how I'm feeling. But we'll go over any questions in the live stream. So don't be shy at all to fire on those. So today it played a lot easier in the morning, which was to be expected. That kind of lean was what we were talking about yesterday. And it wasn't quite as severe as round 1, which was also to be expected. The winds were kicking up a little bit earlier than round number 1, but almost a 1.4, actually a little bit over a 1.4 shot difference between the two waves. So if you played morning guys, or at least, took more guys from the morning wave than you did in the afternoon, you probably felt pretty happy about it for your exposure. And in particular, if you targeted some of the first few tee times out, you had a lot of nuclear rounds in the first hour or so of tee time. So it's looking like it hasn't finalized quite yet. It's looking like it's going to be a pretty good round 2 showdown for me. And that's usually what you get when you have a weather edge like this. But because we do have some weather for tomorrow, it's not going to be the same kind of situation. So rather than having twosomes off of one with the potential for thunderstorms, they're doing threesomes off of both tees. So good on the tour to let us know that way ahead of time so that we could make account for that, right? Starting to try and make plans for that kind of scenario. So when we look at this weather forecast, it also looks pretty flat. It's going to be windy for most of the day, but there's not going to be a weather edge to be had when they're going on threesomes off of both sides. And just to go back to that tweet, they're starting at 7:45 local time. So that is 8:45 Eastern time for those of you on the East Coast. And your last tee time is just a little bit more than 2 hours later. So even if there was, a weather edge to attack with this forecast, you would be limited on what you could do with only about 2 hours of tee times. And then when we check here and it looks so flat from about 8 a.m. when they're starting throughout the rest of the day, there doesn't look like much wiggle room to be had. So weather not going to be as big of a process as what it was for rounds 1 and 2, but still something that we have to talk about on these live streams because course conditions aren't going to be as easy. In general, I would expect less scoring in round 3 compared to what we had in rounds 1 and 2, just because of the sustained winds rearing their head and those wind gusts. If they do truly get to like 25, maybe even get closer to 30 miles an hour towards the very end of play, it could get nasty out there on that back nine. So a scoring average might even be a little bit worse than a -1, which at the John Deere Classic is kind of unheard of. This is normally a birdie fest where we see like -25 winning. If it's going to be windy, maybe it's something closer to -20 that takes this thing home. The next thing we'll go through would be building a player pool for tomorrow. I guess it's worth noting that ownership, just like in round 2 showdown, does skew towards the top end of the leaderboard. So just like for round 2 showdown, where a lot of your chalk were players starting in the top 20, it's going to be the same way for round 3 showdown. So whether you're part of the SHIPIT Nation site, able to get the projections over there, or my Patreon page where I'm posting my stuff, you'll see on those sites a little bit later on that the top end of the board is going to be much higher owned than the rest of it. So for example, a Davis Thompson, probably going to be your highest owned player. A Max Homa, going to be extremely popular in the 7-8K range. Even a Siwoo Kim, a Cam Champ, just kind of pointing out some of the more expensive, more popular players that you're going to see. A Sam Stevens, a Kevin Yu, an Aldrich Potgieter, Denny McCarthy, all going to be your highest owned players towards the top end of the board. So it doesn't make them unplayable, but it is worth noting ahead of time that in general, the higher up the leaderboard that you are, the higher your ownership is going to be compared to your peers. And, there are some 6K guys towards the top that aren't going to be like 25 to 30% owned. So for example, Brian Campbell, who has played extremely well this week, because he's a 6K range player, he might only be like 3% owned for GPPs. But even that 3%, when you compare it to the other guys towards the very bottom end of the pricing, is going to be significantly higher ownership than all the rest of the players. So that's a trend that you always see on these showdown slates, and going to be the same case for tomorrow as well. But when it comes to building a player pool, I like to default with the shots gained metrics. So let's start with the shots gained ball striking, which is where we can try and find guys that were hitting the ball well. Of course, the off the tee play and approach, the most consistent part of golf from round to round. The short game, which includes your around the green and the putting, tends to be a lot more volatile. So that's why we focus on the ball striking categories just a little bit more. And you can see some of your top players listed on the left. So Siwoo Kim was number 1 in shots gained ball striking. Jeremy Paul, Alejandro Tosti, Davis Thompson, and Brian Campbell, all top 5 in this category. And some of them will be chalk, like a Thompson, a Campbell, especially at T2. But a Tosti, if he can make the cut on the number at -4, it's still kind of flip-flopping in either direction between -4, -5. He could be a potential lower-owned player in your lineups that still hit the ball well in round 2. And sure, he did have to bounce back quite wildly today to even make the cut or have a chance to make the cut at that -4. But if he could sneak his way through, he has the kind of momentum that could make sense for your round 3 lineup. So Paul, he also really hit the ball well today, but he's not going to be as chalky because he's a 6K range player and a little bit further down the board at T21. A few other players that really stand out. Poston would have been a great play if he had made the cut. Unfortunately, at -1, he will not be making it to the weekend. But like a Rio Hisatuni gaining over 3 strokes in that category. He also actually lost strokes putting today too, so could have been a lot better. And Michael Thorbjornsen has been hitting the ball extremely well. Pot Guider at T13. He will have some ownership, but another guy that's doing it in a very sustainable fashion. We want a lot of these ball striking poppers in our player pool, and especially the ones that aren't garnering that kind of ownership attention. So that's why having a membership to SHIPIT Nation or my Patreon page is so important, so that you can cross-reference a lot of these stats that we're going through on here with the kind of ownership that they're going to have in round 3. And if you can find me an average to maybe even slightly below averagely owned player that is gaining, let's say, over like 1.5 shots gained ball striking the day before, there's a very, very good chance that you're going to see them in my player pool for round 3. So that's one way I find my player pool, is to go through the ball striking stats. I also try and find some short game regression candidates, and it's not always the good thing that they're losing a bunch around the green with the putter, but if you can find me somebody that threw it all the way with their short game today and that is going to make the cut, right? That's an important aspect too, but also wasn't terrible with the ball striking stats, then you might see them in my player pool as well. So for example, an Austin Eckroat, who had the nuclear round 1 today, he gained off the tee, he gained with his approach play, and then lost over 3 strokes in the short game categories. Like, this would be a short game regression candidate, and he's not going to be super low owned because he's T16, but because he shot even par today and had a quote unquote disappointing round for the people that played him in their round 2 showdown lineups, he's going to be significantly lower owned than what he was for round 2 showdown. So an Eckroat, right, he would be a short game regression candidate. A Gerard, if he can make the cut at -4, we'll have to see if that's good enough to make it to the weekend. He would be another one of those players because he lost about 2.5 strokes with the putting today, but was a gainer in the other 3 tee to green categories. And Nick Hardy as well. He unfortunately will not be playing on Saturday, so I guess we'll skip past that one. But he was another player that gained tee to green but lost in the 2 short game categories. And Jackson Suber, he kind of stands out as well. He gained off the tee and gained with the approach play, but lost about 1.6 strokes on the greens. And then around the green, we can do the same kind of exercise. And it's maybe not as extreme with the around the green play, but if you can find me any semblance of shots gained metrics with the approach play and off the tee, then I'm going to be a buyer on these sort of players. So we have to go the whole way down to a Jake Knapp to really find the first player around the green that would make sense for regression. So he gained a bunch off the tee today, which is his regular. He's one of the longest players on tour, but also gained with his approach play and lost a little bit over a stroke between the short game category. So that's another way that I get onto my players for round 3. And just like the ball striking stats, we want guys that aren't going to be mega chalk. And the thing I kind of like about the short game regression candidates is that most cases, right, they're not going to be the more popular players. So for example, like a Jake Knapp, he'll be super low owned. Like a lot of the other players that we'd consider that are just sneaking through the cut line, perhaps like a Ryan Gerard, are not going to be the most popular players on the slate. In fact, they're going to be leverage pieces that you can mix in. So if you're looking to try and get some lower owned players into your player pool, which is super important on our round 2 and 3 showdown slate when we don't have the placement points in play, then that could be a really good way to do so. And a few other things that I look for in my player pool would be course history guys, so guys that have played well around TPC Deere Run, also high upside players that make a whole bunch of birdies, because that's another aspect of golf that directly correlates with your DraftKings scoring. So, if you go onto the PGA Tour website, the stats tab, you can find birdie or better percentage. A lot of the different databases out there, like you have with Bet the Number right here, will show you a lot of the birdie or better stats over any given sample size. That's another data point that you can use as well. And so those 4 are the things that I use to build my player pool. You can add on top of it. You can add or subtract, make it your own with some of your own key stats to build your player pool. But my main piece of advice for your round 3 showdown lineups is just have a process for building your player pool, right? Don't be picking names out of a hat. Have a rhyme and reason for getting to the players that you're getting to, even if that reason is just that they're low owned. Like you should just have that, written out. It's a really good way to kind of correct your process afterwards, because you can see exactly what went right, what went wrong, the reasonings for getting to certain plays, and then you can clean it up with future slates. So that's why I think it is such an important tool to have. And then on top of that, it makes you less prone to making silly plays, just throwing guys into the player pool for no reason that never had a chance to get there. It takes away some of those messy lineups too. So I'll see if there's any player pool deep dives to go through in the chat. And then afterwards, we're going to go through some DraftKings stuff. So we'll wrap it up with that. What's going on, Joseph? So did I go low today? In fact, it was actually the worst round that I've played in a long time. So maybe that added to the heat exhaustion. I was not having a very good round, but it was more likely that they went hand in hand. Right? I was dealing with heat exhaustion trying to play golf, which is strange. I mean, I've played in much hotter days in Florida. I've played much more golf on days in Florida. It was overcast. It was super humid, so maybe that's what ended up getting to me. But yeah, man, it was a rough day overall on the course. I had a lot of fun, though. Me and my buddies, we enjoyed ourselves out there. And even if I didn't play well, my one buddy shot -8. And it was a course record at the course that we played. So it was fun watching him, at least. He was -5 through his first 8 holes. You don't see that from non-professionals that often, right? Rip Sanjay, yep, that's for sure. Gim Reaper will fold. Does not surprise me. I could see that. He said top 2 GPP plays for Showdown. I don't do questions like that where I just give out plays and whatnot. If you have players that you want me to go through on the shots gain metrics, I am more than willing to do so. But yeah, plays and whatnot, giving those out, not really the idea of SHIPIT Nation or the content that I post. It is much more process based on this channel. Also with a lot of the stuff that I do, sites like SHIPIT Nation, right? They do have the player pools on there that you can check out. I've got my Patreon page where I post my entire player pool and the reasonings to why I'm getting to all my players. Those are great resources for those sort of things, man, but not on the live stream here. So gonna have to pass on your question, but I will say if you have anyone you want me to deep dive, just let me know. Always willing to go through those ones. They've got outright tickets on Grillo, Lipsky, and Roy. Who do I like more? So, I don't think that they're terrible bets with either 3 of those. Like Rio, with his form and his ball striking stats, he's probably my favorite of those 3. I'm assuming the number you got on Lipsky was just outrageous with the outright odds. So I can't talk down on that one. But yeah, Grio's probably got the best chance out of those to win. Roy, he's also got some sneaky good form as well. So good calls on those 3. They're all in contention for you. But yeah, Grillo would probably be my favorite. You're on time tonight. Welcome on in. Who do I like to win it as of today? I don't really have a hot take on that. I just really wasn't paying that much attention to the leaderboard as I was just getting home, mostly trying to make sure that I wasn't throwing up my brains out or anything like that. It was really nauseous for the last few hours. But looking at the top end of the leaderboard here, it's so wide open with how many guys? 12 guys within 2 shots. I mean, I would say Davis Thompson has to be the betting favorite at this point. So if you just want to know, like in a vacuum, who I think is the most likely to win, probably Davis Thompson with his course history. I mean, second place last year, I think he top 20'd his first year here as well. And then this year had the -8 nuclear performance in round 2. On top of that, Davis Thompson the week before had one of the best weeks of his entire year. So he's trending in the right direction. And I know it's crazy to say he's had one of the best weeks of the year, but he's had a lot of missed cuts, a lot of really shitty performances and no cut events before that. So good to see that he's getting the train back on the tracks. And yeah, probably Thompson, man. The odds aren't going to be great though. Fun tournament every year. Amen to that. Birdie Fest can be fun at times. And what's going on? Let's get some of that round 3 magic going. Amen to that, dude. And doing well. Happy 4th to everyone out there. And so thanks for all that I do. Thank you, Nick, for the kind words. All right, let's go on to the strategy section. So like I said, this is probably going to be a much quicker live stream than usual, but still wanted to be able to give you guys the information for tomorrow. So first things first with the contest is they're better than round 2. So I kind of talked shit about DraftKings yesterday, deservingly, in my opinion, because they posted some atrocious contests. But for round 3, they are slightly bigger. So the same trap, for example, I believe has an extra $25,000 in it. So about an extra 1,000 entries that they added to it. The Drive the Green is also a little bit larger. It's a 5K larger than round 2. So now it is the 7th to first place as opposed to the 6th to first place that you had in round 2. So it actually even flattens out the payout structure with them doing that. And then I'd say this $250 4 max, if you're going to enter any of like the smaller GPPs, this is one of the better ones that they have out there. So they did a decent job with it. I mean, it's not like a major championship or signature event level of contest selection, but we've got enough to make it work. And you've got this 4K dog leg. That's a 10% to first single entry. You've also got the Albatross that you guys can check out as well. That is another perfect payout structure contest. And this one is 12% to first, so a little bit over that 10% to first place. But those are all the best contests that you can enter for round 3 because they're going to have less of a top heavy payout structure. They're going to be a little bit flatter for the top 5, top 10, which is really important for having sustainable long-term results. In terms of putting together lineups, it's mostly about getting enough game theory into our lineups. Just like round 2 showdown, we don't have placement points in play. So really our main focus is going to be to try and get as much leverage as humanly possible without making bad plays. And I think that's the part that I'm going to really start adding when talking about this lineup construction is because, yeah, just because somebody's low owned does not make them a good play, right? They're going to be dog shit plays that are 0.5 to 1% owned. And that's why they're 0.5 to 1% owned. But, and I'm not saying that a low owned player has to be 1% owned either, right? A low owned player up top is closer to 9 to 10% owned. It's just kind of different levels when you're dealing with that stuff. But if you can find lower owned plays that still make sense, that's the key for entering in these large field GPPs. So let's start off this lineup with, we're going to start with some ownership towards the top just to kind of show you where you can offset it further down the line. But if you've got lower owned plays towards the top that you think makes sense, don't shy away from taking them, particularly in a showdown format where it's only 18 holes and one of the more variant formats that we have to deal with. But like I said, we're going to take more chalk here just so that it can be a little bit more interesting when it comes to the lineup construction. So let's go Denny McCarthy. I'm not going to use Davis Thompson or Sibu though, because they're the mega chalk for round 3 showdown. And, even though I do want to add some ownership into this lineup, just to kind of force our hand a bit, I'm not going to do it with the chalkiest players on the slate. I think that might be overdoing it a bit. So let's go Denny McCarthy. Second man in, let's go Kevin Yu, who this start here with a T16, a T13 is going to be one of the more popular starts that you can take, but not the mega chalk at all different positions. And then now we've got 4 spots to get our leverage in here and about $7,700 remaining per player. So this is where we really have to start thinking about the ownership. And we're not sure if Gerard is going to make it through the cut or not, right? It's kind of swinging between -4, -5 right now. But if he makes it on the number at -4, like he would be a good spot to differentiate with because his ball striking has been there for the last few events. The putter has just kind of lagged behind. So, if he can find some magic with that putter, he could be due for a pretty low round. Mark Hubbard, he won't be overly chalky at T44, and he's locked through the cut line at -5, so we don't have the same kind of concerns as what we had with maybe a Gerard. Let's keep scrolling down a bit more. McCarty missed the cut, or else he would have been a great play. RIP there as well. I had him in some of my lineups. Let's throw in Perez, right? If he makes the cut on the number, right, that could be another player to throw in, and that's the idea. Like, even if you have some chalk at a few spots, you want to differentiate it with the rest of your lineup. And I'd say like in the $5, $25 GPP, that's the kind of lineup that we were building right here. You want at least 2 or 3 pivots into every single lineup, and that's at least 2 or 3 pivots. You might want 3, 4, even 5 pivots in some of your lineups. So if you wanted to take some of the chalk in the 7K range instead, let's say that your process for whatever reason has you wanting to play Homa no matter what, well, maybe rather than taking a Kevin Yu towards the top end of the board now, you try and take somebody that is a little bit more reasonably owned. So for example, like a Jake Knapp at -5, who is still setting up decent stat-wise, right? One of the short game regression candidates that I was pointing out. but now we're using that to slightly differentiate ourselves and give us a better chance of playing like a Max Homa. So now with this lineup, for example, if your last man in still had some ownership, because we have, you know, pivots since guys like a Victor Perez, pivots like a Ryan Gerard in there already, heck, even Jake Knapp to some extent, giving you that leverage, you can get away with playing like a Chris Ventura or a Seamus Power, for example, that it's not like they're going to be high owned at $6,900, but they are going to be higher owned than some of the peers around them. So that's the idea with the lineup construction, guys. Is just make sure you're getting enough leverage into your lineups. And that was the most extreme example that we could think of, right? The big $5 or $25 GPP, the most entries that you could be playing against for tomorrow. And the smaller the contests that you're in, the less and less the ownership has to matter, because in the larger field contests, you need more leverage to take them down. You need more ability to move up against 10,000 entries than you do against, let's say, only 100 or 200 entries. And then the other part of it too is that in those larger field GPPs, it's easier to duplicate yourself than in some of those smaller field contests. So that's why if you're not entering in those big GPPs, you don't have to think about the ownership as much, because you're trying to beat less people, but it is still something that you should be incorporating into your process. But that's all I've got, guys. Best of luck with all the exposure that you guys are getting for round 3. We will be doing a prop and betting live stream. I'm not sure whether that'll be tonight or tomorrow morning. Stay tuned to my X/Twitter for when that'll be going live. We will be doing one at some point, I promise you guys. It's just that with how I'm feeling right now with this heat exhaustion, I don't know how many more hours that I'm going to want to be up tonight. So we'll see on that. I will still have all my content up for my Patreon members, of course, was already working on that before we got started here. Also, the SHIPIT Nation crew, they're going to have their projections posted as well to help all of you sweaty tryhards with your laps for round 3. And yeah, if your DFS site is not posting projections for round 3 and 4, just because it's a holiday weekend, then shame on them, right? Because, you know, there's a lot of Americans at the SHIPIT Nation crew. There's a lot of Americans. I guess I'm the only one on staff for my site, but I'm an American and I'm still able to get up here and do it for myself. Make sure you join a site that is just as much of a sweaty tryhard as you guys are for all these given slates. And I think that's what I really pride myself on with my content, is that we don't miss a slate. Whether we're feeling good or whether we're feeling shitty like I am right now, always going to be able to give you guys this content. Maybe it'll be slightly lower energy, so be it, right? I'm just going to try and do my best to grind through this kind of thing, but we'll show up at the very least every single time. So best of luck out there. As I was saying before, everyone, I hope to see a lot of you guys towards the top end of those leaderboards. Check out my Patreon page for all of my showdown content for round number 3. And of course, my X/Twitter for all that prop stuff later too. So let's see, any last second questions to go through. He says, all up to Valdez on a 10-foot to change the cut. Ooh, good information, Steven. We'll see what happens there. What's going on? He said, you don't like Hubbard, huh? I like Hubbard, though. He's Homeless Hubs. He's a funny guy. He said, cuts -5. You sank the putt. Okay, good to know. And yeah, good luck out there, Adam. Best of luck, everyone. -5 cut it is. So don't play guys like Gerard at -4 that are not going to be making the weekend now. And let's have ourselves a Saturday.